So with that introduction, you can see that we really have a spectacular group of entrepreneurs who have had amazingly varied sort of moments in their career building up to what they're doing right this minute. And since we're in such a very challenging, changing world in every single business model out there, I want to know, what were your goals when you all got into business? When you started your businesses, did you have any idea you'd end up where you are today? Let's just begin with Melanie.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Wendy. I started my business at the worst economic time of my life, which was in 2009. And so if you all remember, 2009.
It's not pretty.
It was not. That was not the time to start anything. But, you know, the reality was I didn't have that many choices. I had been freelancing for a number of years for rug manufacturers, and I had always planned to be my own boss one day. It wasn't something that I decided, overnight. I had been planning ever since I was a small child. And that's when I was drawing and having commissions to do T-shirt designs and, you know, all through my grade school and high school and college. So when the opportunity presented itself in 2009, I thought, you know what? There's only one way to go when you start at the bottom, up. And I figured if I could get through the first 5 years, as they say, as an entrepreneur, if you get through the first 5 years, you know, it'll be all right. And if I had imagined, did I imagine what it was going to do with the beginning of during the beginning of my business? No. I knew I wanted to create, and I knew I wanted to tell the stories from my heritage, which is the African experience in America, from the Caribbean, and go right back to the continent. And that's what I knew. And also I wanted to tell the stories of all the people that I experienced by traveling around the world. And I used my art as the tool to tell those stories. And at the time, it wasn't the most well-received item because people were more so trying to hold on to their homes, let alone invest in, you know, luxury rugs.
Yeah, yeah. Tiana, you really started quite, maybe, it's all related, of course, but you've had so many extraordinary jobs, and now you're sort of you're on your own.
Well, there's something to be said of, you know, about intentionality, and Melanie just touched on this when she started. I think you sort of know. I come from many generations of business owners and lived as a child in a structure that was defined by my parents. So when I went into the world, and my path into design was serendipitous, to be honest with you. But once I decided that I would be at the intersection of art and design, the goal was always to be on my own. So I started in the industry with Bill Sofield at Studio Sofield at a very interesting juncture in the firm's trajectory where we were working with Gucci Group. And it was Tom Ford and Domenica De Sole, and they were changing the model for Gucci Group from, you know, Fifth Avenue and Paris and Milan to the shop and shop or every major city. So I was there at that point at the table, and it changed the way that I saw my trajectory and myself. I always say, given the grand adventures I've had, I'm, you know, a little Jamaican girl from Queens, and it showed me through the visionary leadership of the owner of that firm what was possible. And I've had the great fortune in this journey to always work with visionary leaders. So the examples from the Andre Ballages to the Simone de Puries at Phillips. I didn't go to Sotheby's or Christie's for a reason. I wanted to work with Simone. He started this on his own. So I worked with a lot of people who created their own path. This is year 5 of independence for me, but from the moment I had a leadership role, I knew that the path was for me to be independent and on my own.
Right. Janine?
I had no idea that this is what I would be doing with my life. I was a policy attorney before doing this. I was doing meetings with the Obama administration about the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization, and that was my life. But at the end of the day, when I would go home, design was what I was very into. I would go online and really want to see, these amazing spaces. And it was actually going online and looking at spaces, but not seeing myself reflected in what I was seeing, that really was the beginning of Afro Chic. So Afro Chic was always an attempt to fill a gap that I saw, and then my husband really supported me in trying to fill it. And that's how we started, writing about people like Mulaney, who was doing rugs, writing about, people who were designing furniture, people who had amazing homes that looked like me. So it really was a passion project that has taken me on an absolutely incredible journey I would not have imagined I'd be on now 12 years later. But I think that passion driving you is another really important part of being an entrepreneur, and wanting to be authentic to yourself and wanting to find some way to tell your story. And I wanted to tell the stories of people that had beautiful homes, like my grandmothers always were about furniture and design, and my mother was always about those things. And I thought, we see this in magazines, all these beautiful spaces, but I know that our community also has that same desire and love for spaces, and Afro Chic was that way to express it.
And Brian, where did you come in this loop here?
Well, as I think Janine kind of alluded to, I had even less idea than she did that this is what we would be doing. And I'll be 100% honest. Our business, my part in it, we got started as a dodge on my part. I was really trying to get out of design in some ways. At that point, as Janine said, she was a lawyer, and I was kind of a wandering academic in the Bay Area. So I had gotten one master's degree. I was working on another master's degree, going into a PhD. And I knew absolutely nothing about design. And Janine was very creative in getting into that. And I was a terrible conversation partner. So I actually made the suggestion that we start the blog Afro Chic. We worked together on the name and kind of looking to see, what was the intervention, what could we do to contribute to the conversation. And everything sort of grew from there. So from there, she sort of became this teacher of mine. Like everything that I know about design, I learned from her. And then in that process, I kind of found a moment where what I was doing in school was actually looking at very obscure cultural artifacts and looking at them on windows on the larger culture that created them, and realized that the window that I was looking through, the lens I was looking through, was a very narrow one. But that design, for everyone who's fortunate enough to have a home, at some point or another, we all think about what to put in them. And once you start from there, then design can become this great nexus point. It becomes this incredible window on history, culture, the interactions between different people in different places, because we realize that everything that became a trend, even now, becomes a trend at a certain point, at a certain time, in a certain place for a certain group of people, and there are reasons around that. So that was kind of my point of falling in love with it. I was always involved, very quietly, because I just didn't know at the time where all of this would go. And I guess to the point of intentionality, there's so much to be said for it, and so it's so important at the same time. I feel like I don't know that we ever intended to do anything that we've ever done. Everything that we've kind of grown into, we've learned from doing what we were doing at the time, and it just led into something else.
Right. So let me ask you about social media, which nobody knows anything about. Well, I really probably know the least about it, but I want to talk about the pros and cons, because obviously there are so many pros for an entrepreneur, because you have your own platform that you control, and you don't need to ask anybody for permission, or it's yours. So talk about, is it Instagram that is the driver these days, as opposed to anything else, a website, whatever? Is it Instagram, or what? Yes, I do.
Well, just full disclosure, I am addicted to Instagram. Okay.
I know we all are, let's face it. I think I am too.
It's because first of all, I love taking pictures. And I just look at it as another extension to my creativity. I love to curate a feed, and it's just the idea of capturing something in a creative way. And I think the power of Instagram is this for me. I get to talk directly to my audience. Right. And because being in an industry where, you know, I've constantly felt that I haven't been heard or seen, Instagram allows me as a designer, not just me, but the community, Black community specific, to feel like they have a space and that they're being heard and listened and visible. And so there's so much power in that, and I use Instagram as a way to tell my story from an authentic perspective. You know, I don't hold back on, you know, it's not always about, oh, I had a great day. No, that's just not life. It's not And so I do share that I did apply for food stamps at one time when I was in business because I didn't have any business, and I had to eat. And I didn't have a, you know, family that could just give me funds to support me. I had bought a house and started a business at the same time, so my funds were drained. And you know, my mother said, well, that's why they have these programs. You go and see if you could apply. Mm-hmm. And you know, I did. I mean, at the time I didn't get accepted, but the point is, I like people to understand that entrepreneurship is not, you know, it's not as pretty as the pictures that we see on social media, but it is a place to connect, and I think it also helps to draw in the audience that you're trying to build. Once your audience, I say, feels that there is a connection, then they're more inclined to share what you do, even if they're not buying. It's just an idea of, hey, Wendy, did you see so-and-so? I could tag this one. Hey, Tiana, did you see this? Mm-hmm. And the word starts to spread organically and in a way that back in the day when word of mouth was the way that we marketed, it's now on a global platform.
Right. The other thing is that all the wonderful talent that you're finding for the Black Artist and Designer Guild, is it mostly done through Instagram, looking at people's feeds and seeing what they're doing?
Yeah, I really use Instagram as that tool because, again, we're in a creative industry, it really allows us to show our work in a bold way. And that's what I wanted to accomplish with that. And I only use Instagram for social. I mean, of course, there's a website, because I do think websites are important as well. And we cannot solely depend on one platform. We do need to be on multiple platforms. Pinterest is another great one, but I'm sorry, me and FB, that's Facebook, we're just not really friends anymore.
What, you're not friends with because of all the stuff?
I just don't want to be bothered. Right. You know, it's just not as pretty because you can't curate the feed like on IG. Yeah. And you know, when I say IG, that's Instagram, y'all. But you know, it's just not the same. And as you can see, the way I talk about these platforms, they're like my teammates in a way. Right. And you know, when you are limited on financial means, you know, social media is still relatively free, except for, you know, the ads, but it is a way for people to put out their ideas and test the market. Right. For very little.
Yeah. Tiana, in your business, you've gone through so many changes in the different places that you have been. How do you feel about it?
Well, social media has had the greatest effect on my business in the last 2 years, in the sense that I'm so intricately tied to media. Right. You know, I came up in a world where print was king, and you waited for those pages. You waited to touch and feel the pages. You couldn't wait till it hit the stands. You know, I come from a culture professionally where my clients still covet those pages. The truth of the matter is the social media, on the flip side, has been the most freeing and powerful tool we could possibly use, because, you know, in going back to did I think I would end up here, I'm on this stage, I think, because of social media, in the sense that as someone who runs a communications agency, my job is to tell someone else's story. When I started using social media to do my late night curation or things that were on my mind, I'm a closet academic myself, so I do all this research that has absolutely nothing to do with my sort of day-to-day client work. And because my feed, my personal feed is private, I'm only talking to editors like yourself, and curators, and a very select group of people. When I was able to express my point of view at the intersection of art, design, and Pan-African culture, and sort of weave those things together is when everyone was like, oh my goodness, you know, you're a writer. Why do you look at things this way? How does it, well, the fact of the matter is, you know, I spent 20 years in an industry not seeing myself. And then through social media, I find Melanie, I find Afro Chic, you know, it's natural to look for yourself. At the same time, it is a way for a brand, from a content standpoint, to tell a story that is their own. And what I found is that there's a switch. So people share stories on their feed, and that prompts their audience to read the story. Right. Before it was you saw the story, right? Then you told everyone, and you know, and it's flipped now. So showing my clients that there is this relationship. Their development of content will never be a Wendy Goodman in the sense of an editorial sensibility, but you're creating your story in a different kind of way, and I think, you know, you have to be very sophisticated at this point now to get through the morass. Maybe 5-6 years ago, if you started early, it was very easy to make an impact, but now it's absolutely essential. And every small firm, every business, every creative that's trying to cut through all of the noise, you have to be exceptional. So you can find an audience, but the stakes are much higher. And then understanding where the audience is. Now we know that Facebook, you know, there's an older demographic on Facebook. And although I, like you, absolutely love Instagram, it's a problem, I know that if I have to speak to my cohorts who are middle-aged parents, I have to go to Facebook. You know, I know that if someone hears about me in a certain demographic, they're going to go to my website first. Right. They're not going to be on Instagram. So you have to know your audience and where to find them. Absolutely.
May I just ask a question? Because in doing my stories, I do print, obviously, which we all know is just kind of shrinking a little bit, but we still have a magazine, and that is the great, wonderful thing. But often, I get requests for, you know, people pitch stories where I find them and I say, but we'd love to do it on The Cut. That is our online, where my design stories live for New York Magazine, and I less and less hear from designers and from architects, oh, but we really want print. I'll hear it still, but I think that we did a big redesign so it looks really beautiful, and also because you have so many more eyes on that story, right?
Just to comment on that, I had a conversation yesterday. I will not disclose the name of the publication. When you look at online, they have 1 million unique monthly visitors, 5 million return visitors a month, and when you think about circulation and pass-through, it's 250,000. You want to grow your business, you have to be online, but there's a saturation point. You know, so we know if you're in New York Magazine, you're going to get the right eyes, but or New York Times or, you know, Wall Street Journal. By the time you get past that top tier, it just falls off tremendously. So it requires, you know, 5 times more work to get the story out there. So that's when the sort of influencer matrix becomes important.
I mean, I love social media. That's how we started. You know, we started when there was still Blogger, when, you know, the Google interface. And I like to refer to it as the great equalizer, because I think that particularly when you're from communities that are underrepresented, social media is your way to get out there without any gatekeeper, without anyone telling you what you can or can't do. And that's how we started, you know, doing a blog, then on Twitter, going out on Facebook. I'm like everyone else, we're all addicted to Instagram, and when it went down the other day, everyone almost died. Like, what's happened? I love Pinterest. You know, he knows I'm a Pinterest addict. We have about over 30,000 pins, and I can say that most of them are mine. Little OCD there. But yeah, I think it just allows you an opportunity, like you said, to reach people. But I also think it's really important if you are a business owner who's African American or a woman, that you're able to break through in a way that you can't otherwise. I remember when we first started and we started reaching out to publicists and asking about, okay, we would like you to go and find magazines for us, and they told us what their retainer fee was every month, and we were like, okay, we can't possibly afford that. And so that's why we started to look at social media as the way to begin to tell our story. And you do find your audience there. It's a great way to find your audience and to be able to communicate with them on a daily basis, to be able to bring them into your world. I love that. I love seeing other people's worlds, and I also do love that when I'm on social media, I can find my community. We talk a lot about underrepresentation of African Americans in the design community. But when you're on social media, if I'm on Instagram in the morning, I see everybody because I can look all over the globe and be extremely inspired. So it kind of keeps me going as a business owner, and I think it also helps our audience to connect with us on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, what's so interesting about social media is, the way that it operates on a business standpoint and the way it operates also socially. In a lot of ways, it's a very quintessentially 21st century thing. It's a real defining mark of this new century, and as such, we're watching all of the kind of growing pains of us trying to figure out what it is and what to do with it. And like you said, you do reach this saturation point, and that becomes sort of the double-edged sword of it, right? Because now, on the one hand, you do have that opportunity not only to reach so many people, and also another great thing about social media is that there are tons of people out there who would never speak to you in real life, who will respond to you. You can connect with people on social media who would never notice you were in the room if you were sitting right across from them. But at the same time, it does become this sort of cacophony. It becomes this huge background noise, and you see people saying all the time, I feel like I'm inundated with it, I feel like I'm swimming in it. But at the same time, somewhere within there, I think, is this real search for authenticity. And where you're talking about the need to break through, or the need to kind of stand out from the noise, I think that's where it is. And that becomes this really, really interesting opportunity with the way that you engage in social media, even from a business standpoint. Because for us, again, as Janine said, it became the place to go and tell our story, whether that meant, as Janine said, having the passion for what you're doing and what it is that drives you, and then pointing out how important that passion is. Because as Mulaney said, the entrepreneurial game is not at all points cute. It is a lot of work that goes into every Instagrammable moment, and there's a lot of things that you maybe don't want to share between those moments. But finding that audience and finding those people who do want to go with you on the journey, and actually being able to express that, not just today's a good day, today's a bad day, but regardless of what type of day it is, this is the thing that keeps what I'm doing going. This is what I'm trying to bring into the world. When you have that, that's when you start to break through, and that's when people become your audience. They become not just your followers, but people who kind of understand what it is that you're trying to say, because it's something that they've been looking for, even if they didn't know it themselves, whether it's representation, whether it's culture, whether it's art, or whether it's just the sense that, it is for this other person just like it is for me.
Wendy, to your point about the designers wanting to be in the print side, I think there's a lot. The value for print has changed because, especially now that I think I'm closer to middle age and I want legacy, and print is going to last much longer. So when you go back and try to do a retrospective of me, to have to Google me, or I'd rather pick up a stack of New York magazines where I was featured.
You better keep that magazine going, that's all I can say.
That's right.
Really.
So I think the value of it has changed and the importance. So it's just a shame that, the magazines have gotten so much thinner and smaller, and the opportunities have come smaller, basically.
Well, yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to just jump in because when you're thinking about, you were talking about the publicists and finding people. Before social media, there was probably no way to find me. That was intentional, though.
Right.
But when you think about media, and it wasn't until a couple years ago when I started having the conversations about representation, when I felt like I'd reached that station, I can really sort of push this envelope, because I was independent. I was not representing someone. the acknowledgement that your decision to feature someone is support. What a lot of people don't realize is that the access is not closed. It's very difficult to enter.
Right.
And I think that social media is so powerful because now the editors are looking to that open field
Yes.
to find what's new and exciting for themselves.
Yes.
And so for many years, watching the careers of designers and artists and architects being supported by these institutions, it's proximity. You know, as an editor, you get 600 emails a day with people wanting to get in the door. Who are you going to answer? Someone you have a relationship with, someone that you've traveled with for 10 years. It's not so, you know, so at one point it was an intentional exclusion. At another point, it's just sheer capacity and access. Social media has completely changed that. When you think about even Melanie, like, I'm on that site, the bag site, all the time because I was like, where were all these people?
And they were always there.
They were always there.
They were
The
always
architects for my daughter to aspire to be, or, you know, the creative. So it's this wonderful thing, but there is a legacy of, you know, intentional and unintentional exclusion just by the way things are structured.
I think that just one thing to Melanie's point about the changing value of print that's interesting to watch is I think it's important to note technology never goes backwards, but the pendulum of where our emphasis goes always swings back and forth. So one of the things that was interesting for us when we first started, coming from non-design backgrounds, was at the point where bloggers began to make a real intervention into the conversation on design, there was a question of who was really a designer, who was actually a designer, who qualified. And at the time, there was that fight of going, okay, well, how do I prove that I know what I'm doing or what I'm saying? And as that grew, we kind of came into this moment in social media where everyone having a voice and everyone having a platform seemed to erode the importance of expertise. And so people who maybe not have been the most skilled in their areas, whether we're talking about politics or economics or something like that, by dint of the fact that they had a large following, gained a lot of power in that area. But that aspect of it will continue to go back and forth, where we're seeing sort of the problems of I guess, opening that up too widely, whereas that itself was a response to the idea of things being so tightly controlled that you couldn't get around it. So now we have this great equalizer that you can kind of go around some of the control structures, but I think as we go back and forth, we'll kind of find this middle ground of like paying attention to the areas that need to be paid attention to, and then that point you'll see with things like print that will continue to endure.
Well, I think one thing that's really important that I talk about with younger editors and with students is the fact that we have these fantastic tools now, and you can sit in front of your computer, you can Google your life away. It's so great. When I started my career, it was called waiting at a phone booth with a lot of quarters in my pocket, crying a lot, and dragging bags around because I mean, it was just like, it was, Middle Ages. But the thing is, the wonderful thing about when I started my career was the chatter. The offices I worked in were noisy and busy, and people were running around it. If you wanted to talk to somebody, now seriously, I get slacked by someone sitting over there. And it's like, oh, hi, I'm over here. But nobody talks to anybody. And I
tell everyone what Slack is.
Oh, Slack is like an instant message on your computer. So instead of an email, it's even faster. It's like somebody's whispering in your ear, but on your computer. So the point is, I think that from my work, I always, as you know, go and see the projects. Because you can get a lot of, you can look at things that aren't really authentic, and they cannot work out, but you need to see them and you need to talk to people, and that's how we've all gotten to know each other through the years, is talking and listening and having these conversations. And I think it is invaluable. And as much as social media and computers and the interaction with people and the conversation is absolutely critical. So you think? I think it's so important. And also what you shared about food stamps. Oh, okay. Ooh, it's going so quickly. It's, social media, there's something called FOMO. I don't know if all of you know about it, because I just learned about FOMO. I didn't know I had it, but I have it, okay? And that is that you are just, I forget what it even means, but anyway, you get very upset.
Fear of missing out.
Because you're missing out on all this stuff. Well, guess what? People's lives aren't that great. But I think it's really important to share the truth because all of us are struggling. All of us are challenged. You have done the most incredible thing empowering people to be seen and heard, and it's just major. It's so exciting. But I do think sharing stories of the challenge is also so important because it helps people to understand it's the hardest thing to be an entrepreneur. It's the hardest thing because you're on your own and you've got to figure it out. So anyway, we're gonna have questions now. All right. Okay. The first one is, what are your top 3 trend picks for New York City apartments, homes? Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about design. Really. Just that little thing. So what are your top 3 trends for New York City homes and apartments for 2019 and 2020?
See, the thing is, I don't believe in trends. I just have this, thank you, clap somebody. I really think spaces have to reflect who you are and what you want, what message you want to get across to while you're there as well as your visitors. And I think spaces change because we change as individuals. So, this year maybe you want, like me, teal and turquoise walls, okay? And that's what you want because you want to feel like you're in the Caribbean. Go with it, just do it. And then 5 years later, 2 years later, whatever the time frame is, change it. I think the trend is, this is my trend, we can change our spaces. Just like we could change our mindset and change the way we interact with people, and it's okay.
Yeah, that's trends. So what I find is fascinating about even that idea, the idea of home being a trend like fashion. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't turn over my house every 2 years. So it's really interesting. Like, I think the question is, like, what are the editors excited about, right? So they're excited about bourgeoisie boheme, they're excited about black kitchens, they're excited about maximalism. So if we're going to talk about a broad landscape of design media, these are the things that people are talking about, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, as everyone in this panel has said, your home is a space of your personal viewpoint, point of view in politics, and it should represent your experience. And I hope that the trend will be that, my dream when I was a kid growing up in Queens was to have an Upper West Side apartment with a big bookcase and a Persian rug, and because, I thought I'd be a professor, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope the trend is that your home should reflect your travels, your, experiences. So that's a trend that I want to push.
That's great.
Right?
Great.
I mean, a lot of our clients are companies, so we have to be a little bit trend-based because they want something that's going to look current or reflect the time. But I think there are things like maximalism, but I think artisanship is really having a resurgence right now. People want, just like we're talking about publications, they want something that has had a human hand create it, it's more special, it has meaning, you feel something and you're connected with it. We were in Morocco last fall in September, and one of the things about going to Morocco is when you're walking, in those souks, everyone's making something, and they're making all different types of things. They're doing, the pierced lanterns, they're doing leather work, they're whittling and making things out of wood. It was really amazing just to see that life itself was creating every day. And I think that we desire that in our homes, and we've done that with some of our products. We just made a collection of Moroccan lighting, which has that artisan feel to it. But I think we'll see that come in. I love maximalism. I was the modern girl that I was all about modern, and now I'm like more of everything. And I love floral. Floral is to me, but it's not a trend as much as it is, again, going back to an older time. Both my grandmothers had floral sofas. One of them had the plastic on it that your legs would get stuck to, because it was. But I realized she did that because she put a lot of money into that. It wasn't like you could just go out and buy we didn't have like IKEA, like it wasn't you just go out and buy furniture. When they bought that furniture, it really meant something. And just to kind of bring those elements back, like floral, just reminds me of that time of back in the, for me, it was like the 70s, but I think she'd probably had that sofa since like the 60s or 50s.
I think for me, on the one hand, I definitely agree with Melania with regard to trends. At the same time, I do think, and with regard to the fact that your home should be an expression of who you are, the role I think that trends play is I think they create a context to how you'll express that from one moment to the next. So for me, there's nothing in particular that I'll say, put this in your homes, but what I would like to see is just sort of surround yourself with things that you connect with, rather than pursuing a look or a style. Find the things that actually, not necessarily like a Marie Kondo way of like, this just brings me joy, but just, what does it say? What does it express? To what extent are you aware of it, familiar with it? I mean, one of the things that we always find as we're doing our research, being nerdy about design, is so much of design in the ancient world, wherever you were, the thing meant more than what it actually was. So you would see things like anything from prayers scrawled onto the sides of tea kettles to whole religious cosmologies woven into rugs. It would be sort of like if your toaster had a series of affirmations or like religious ideas scribbled onto it, right? But that's how foreign it is to us now. To us, a thing simply is the thing that it is. And that connection is something that we look for, and it's something that we miss. We feel it when it's gone, even if we don't know that we wanted it in the first place. So that's the thing that I think we can all kind of pursue.
This is a great question. How do you ensure that you as an entrepreneur get paid fairly and fully in business transactions when other parties may see you as someone they can shortchange without a big firm backing you up? What do you do to protect yourself?
Well, I know for me, when I started my business, I actually reached out to a lot of the rug manufacturers who owned companies. So we all became allies. It's a small industry. And so once we started to share resources, like, oh, well, how do you charge? And, what manufacturer do you use? And so I was able to get inside knowledge from people who've been in the business for like 20 plus years. And I never felt shy or anything to just ask for what I needed at that moment. And when I started the business, I was at one price. But then, and like with everything else, there's inflation, and you become more confident with your work, and so you increase your prices. And I was taught early on that, it's okay to increase your pricing and don't feel guilty about it. And so once I started implementing that and, of course, getting the portfolio for the work to back it up, I was like, hey, and I was willing to even walk away from projects. But I think what it is that I made sure I surrounded myself with people who had more experience and knowledge in the business, so I stayed protected.
I agree with you. Community, community, community. I know what's going on within the communication world, what people are, sort of demanding. I also provide that information to my clients who are making decisions about their pricing, because a lot of what I do is not just media-based, it's strategy-based. And, being a part of a living, breathing community, I think that's the beauty of what we all do in being in an art and design architecture space. It's all about what's happening out in the world. These experiences and collectives and conversations are not in isolation in front of a computer all day. And I think that's part of the benefit of doing this business in this industry.
Right. I mean, it's a constant, you learn. It's not something that I think you come in knowing how to set your prices. And it really is hard for designers to know when you start. We talk with this a lot with students who work with us and intern with us. I think first you pay your dues. And you end up doing a few free projects for brands just to kind of get your name out there. A lot of designers secretly will first work on their own house, and that's like their first big project, and you'll see that, and hopefully they get it published. But then after you've done that and you've learned the business, then you can start saying, look, you got to pay me more money. Like, I just can't do something for a few $1,000s because it won't cover my time. It won't cover if I need to bring in staff to help with it. But it takes time, I think, to gain that level of confidence. We finally have gained that level of confidence where I am not afraid to say no, where I realize that taking on a ton of smaller projects that, oh, they pay a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, makes no sense. Wait for the bigger project and realize that when you're saying no, you're actually opening a door for something much bigger to come along. And that's scary, of course, because you are on your own. There's no one else paying for, you to cover your bills. There's nothing else coming in. But the moment you do it, it's also pretty exhilarating when you learn to say no and can say, and also you can say, this is what I'm worth, and know your value.
Sorry, but I know our time we're really almost up. And I'm going to ask this next question because I love this question. What's your take on the retail thinking at Hudson Yards? Danger, opportunity? I have so much to say on this, but Brian, what do you say?
Why'd I have to draw this one first?
You want some support over here? We got community, remember?
All right, we good. I'm safe. I'm with my people. I'm good. All right. I think it's never just one or the other. I mean, there's always a little bit of both, and it becomes a question of how you approach it. At the same time, it is a space that's built to operate a certain way, for a certain group of people, and that's a hard one. All right.
It's a complicated question.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass that one. I'm gonna pass the mic on that. About
what do you think?
About the retail.
I think it's interesting only because that model is so old. The mall, a stacked mall of really expensive stores is so interesting. but the thing is, I don't know. We can't get into Hudson Yards. We really can't.
I'm going to just say, because I've been talking about Hudson Yards all day, because it was all over the news, and I was like, Hudson Yards. It's exciting to see something new in the city. But at the same time, just as a designer and someone who lives in New York, and I would love to see it be a space that represents the affordable housing that we so desperately need.
Thank you.
I want to design amazing spaces. I want to design amazing homes, but I also want to be in a city where everybody can afford to be here, because New York City is a special place. It's why we all get to do what we do. I couldn't do this anywhere else. And when you do see sort of a playground for billionaires, you do get concerned about, access and, how do we have a space for designers? How do we have a space for artists? How do we have a space for people who are writers? None of us are going to be living there. So it does become this question of, where is New York going? How do we continue to support those who need affordable housing? How do we continue to support designers, writers, artisans, who are the very fabric of the city?
And how does it become a space for inclusion? I mean, that becomes a question as well.
Well, I think this is the fantastic, all these great issues you're bringing up are what these 2 days at the Y are all about, because to talk about the future city and the fact that Hudson Yards is opening up is so amazing, because it's absolutely what what the city can bear. How much can it take? I think
we also are creating these ghost towns. We're creating these
Yes.
retail ghost towns. Like, we just had Brookfield open not so long ago. Now we're going to empty that out, and everyone's going to run to Hudson Yards. Don't know if it's the same stores, highly likely, but we keep creating these ghost towns, and they become these relics, and then everyone else gets left behind. So it's really fascinating.
Well, I don't want to end on a not high note, but we do have to end. But I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here tonight with me and with all of us. And I thank you for being with us, because I'm so excited about your work, what you're doing, and what we're going to see about what you're doing going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.